Well, greetings and salutations, everybody. Welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is John Campea, and this is a companion video. What are companion videos? Well, I'm awfully glad that you asked. See, every day on the John Campea Show, we take time for live questions, but we don't always have time to get around to all the live questions that get sent in. But I want to make sure those questions get answered properly in a video, so we gather them up and address them here on companion videos. And we've got a couple of days of companion videos to get through right now. We've got Wednesdays and today's Thursdays that we need to get through. So let's not waste any time. Let's dive right into it and start getting to the questions we need to get caught up on. All right, the first one comes to us from Lamar McLeod, who writes, would love to see a Curse of Strahd D&D film. You were talking about Dungeons and Dragons the other day because news has come out that the guys who wrote Spider-Man Homecoming and directed Game Night, I love Game Night, that movie's great, and were supposed to direct The Flash before, more drama came undone. Looks like they're going to do a D&D movie, completely original, whatever, but some people have some ideas about different, stories from D&D lore that maybe could adapt, and you've got one there, Lamar. All right, Draco Eris writes, I agree with you and Rob 100% about Man of Steel. Yeah, I love that movie. That movie's so good. Superman doesn't need fixing, and I will always go, right now, the two movies I love the most, that most critics seem to not like, or at least a lot of critics don't like, is what am I talking about? Man of Steel and Lion King. Yeah, those are the ones. But that's where I'm at right now. All right, Starfire XXX writes, there are D&D book series that could be adapted. Books take place in D&D multiverse, but do what need for a story. Maybe adapt books instead of write from scratch. I don't know. I would say write from scratch because honestly, how many really popular Dungeons and Dragons books, like novels and stories, are there? I've never heard. I can honestly tell you, seriously, and I'm sure maybe you have and other people have. I'm just telling you from my own experience. I've never had people come up to me and say, friends of mine who read books that go, oh man, there's this D&D based novel. That's amazing. I've never had anybody tell me that. So I got to be honest with you, Starfire. My first one would be write something from scratch. Create a new story, create a new world within the Dungeons and Dragons universe. Don't have the handcuffs about some B novel, some B level or C level novel, just because it has Dungeons and Dragons in the title. You know what I'm saying? So, and now granted, take that with a grain of salt that I've never read a Dungeons and Dragons novel. I've read World of Warcraft novels and I've read, other things, but I've never read a Dungeons and Dragons novel, but I've never really talked to anybody that highly recommended one either. So I would say go from scratch on that. That would be my idea at any rate. Harry Mudd writes, Ambiance is the longest movie ever, made at 720 hours, 30 days. I got to tell you, man, I've never heard of it, but now I got to look that up to see what the hell that's all about, because that's kind of crazy. Jeffrey Bynes writes, issue with Soups was lack of care for innocent lives. Disagree. I have that argument with people all the time. There's two big fallacies about Man of Steel. Number one, Superman shouldn't have killed Zod. We've proven that he should have 1,000 times over. He absolutely needed to. The only other option was to let Zod destroy humanity. There was no jail that could hold him. Zod was a better warrior than Superman was. Superman had been Superman for a couple of days. He had an opportunity to stop him, or else it was going to mean countless lives. He had to kill Zod. That's the situation that the story put him in, where that he only had two choices. Allow untold numbers of humans to die, or kill Zod. And there was no other. The other one is this, is like, well, he shouldn't have let all that damage happen. He had no choice. That wasn't his decision. He had been Superman for like 24 or 48 hours. He's combating a dude who's been a warrior his entire life and a general. That fight was going to take place wherever they want. See, I hear people go, well, he should have drew him out to fight other. He was fighting a more experienced and smarter guy who was intent on killing humans. He wasn't going to get drawn out somewhere else. Like if I went into the fight and went into the cage and fought UFC heavyweight champion Daniel Cormier. Okay. Now I could say, well, I'm going to draw him out of the cage and actually fight him in the aisleway on the other side of the stadium. That's great for me to say that, but Daniel Cormier is the more powerful fighter than me, obviously, by far. But Daniel Cormier is the more powerful fighter. That fight's going to take place wherever he decides it's going to take place. And I just got to look for my opportunities to stop him. But the reality is it's just not the case. So I've always rejected that. Again, that's a situation of what the story put Superman in a particular situation, and he just had to do the best he could do. Like this ridiculous notion that, oh, he should have just taken it. It wasn't his choice. It wasn't up to him. He was fighting a much more seasoned, much more capable warrior than he was, who had all of his power, and he just had to do what he could do to stop him. A guy who was bent, who said his only goal now was to destroy all of humanity. That fight was going to take place wherever he wanted the fight to take place, and he just had to stop him. So I reject that line of thinking, my brother. I reject that line of thinking. All right, Sully writes, how was Roman Reigns in Hobbs and Shaw? Honestly, unless I missed it, I don't even think he had a single line. Seriously. I think he's in a number of scenes and a good number of shots, particularly the action sequences, but I don't know if he had a single line. If he did, he had one line. So, but seeing him in action shots, I mean, he's Roman Reigns. I mean, so in the action shots, he looked great. All hail Thanos writes, girl from Hobbs and Shaw's from MI6. Yeah, because I remember like the girl was really good. Who is she from? And you're right. She was the side character in Mission Impossible 6. And she was really good in that too, by the way. She was really good in that. Dak Patton writes, my favorite song is The End by The Doors. Also, yeah, I think Rob said that was his favorite song too. And I tell my girlfriend all the time, I'll watch any A24 movie. Had to send her clips of Rob saying it. Seriously, A24. I mean, they've just very quietly gone about being one of the most prolific, at least in terms of quality, like now, don't get me wrong. I'm not going to pretend that I love every A24 film, but even the films that they put out, because remember that the Ghost Story, I believe that was A24, right? Even movies that they put out that I don't like A Ghost Story, is at least very interesting. Like that one didn't work for me, but even though it didn't work for me, it was still very, very interesting. And they tried doing some really cool stuff from a storytelling point of view for that movie, right? But a lot of their movies are just damn good. And they are probably the most overlooked company right now in the movie business. They are probably the most overlooked company in the movie business right now. All right. Harry Mudd writes, Streets of Philadelphia is my all-time favorite. I'm a huge fan of The Boss. Dude, I'm a huge fan of The Boss too. Even as a kid growing up in Canada, I used to dance around my place playing, I had the Born in the USA record, and I would play that, just play Born in the USA over and over again. And even though I was in Canada and not an American, dancing in the dark and all that kind of, anyway, yeah, The Boss is The Boss, man. Space King Luna writes, can we please have a trivia battle between Chris and Rob? I would like to see this. John, you can't play though. You're too OP. No, look, I'll leave the movie trivia stuff to Harloff. Harloff can go and do the movie trivia stuff. My show is a talk show. We're not a movie trivia show. So no, we will not be having any movie trivia battles on my show, but it's an interesting idea. It's an interesting idea. It's just not what my show is for, but thanks for asking, Space King. All right. Harry Mudd writes, Ambiance is the longest movie ever made at 720 hours. The trailer itself clocks in at 72 minutes. Obviously it's not a real movie. It's just, whatever. I'm fascinated by it now. I got to look that damn thing up. All right. Double Crit writes, what if Jennifer Lawrence was cast as Metroid? Then Jennifer Lawrence would be cast as Metroid. That's the answer to that question. Is there a Metroid movie coming? I mean, maybe there is, and I'm just not remembering it. I don't remember there being a Metroid movie coming. Jim Jam Baru writes, your opinion. How can physical media like vinyl and cassettes be on the rise in popularity again, whilst 35, 70 millimeter and DVD Blu-rays are on the decline? Well, there's a couple of things. Number one, don't pretend like they're all on an even playing field, right? It's not like, think of it this way. If you take me, 220 pounds, right? And I wanted to lose weight by doing a certain exercise regime. If the same exercise regime is done by somebody who's 320 pounds, I don't know if that's a good analogy. Bottom line is this. Things like vinyl and cassettes can be on the rise because their baseline is almost at nothing, right? So they've got nowhere to go but up. Whereas things like, traditional projected film, Blu-rays, DVDs, they're up here. So they have nowhere to go but down. So it's easy to say, well, cassettes and vinyl are on the rise. Well, yeah, because their baseline is practically at nothing. Almost nobody buys vinyl my wife will buy records, but not many people like my wife in the grand scheme of things. So the starting number is way down here. So even just the slightest more interest in it means the numbers go up. But Blu-ray and DVDs is the de facto standard right now, and it's just losing ground because it's got nowhere to go but down. So it's not like an even playing field as you're looking at it because they're two different starting points. You see what I'm saying? So that's why one can be on the rise while others will be in decline because there are two dreadfully different starting points. That's my thought on that anyway, Jim Jam. Harry Mudd writes, I'm paid to be annoyingly brilliant. Martin Clunes about his performance in Doc Martin. Yeah, I remember in the show earlier today, you mentioned that show, Doc Martin. I've never even heard of the show before. I got to admit, I've never heard of Martin Clunes, but it sounds like it's a show that you enjoy, my friend. All right, Harry also writes, it was a 1955 Lincoln Futura that was bought for $1 from Ford. It was then customized into the Batmobile by George Barris. Again, I've got to believe that it was still a handshake deal because even back then you couldn't buy a car for $1. So it had to be some kind of handshake deal that went along with that. But it's fascinating history. JB Bonifacio writes, regarding Tarantino and his eventual 10th film, wouldn't you stay in your sandbox if it was better than 95% of all sandboxes operating in cinema today? No. I mean, look, don't get me wrong. If Quentin Tarantino does his 10th film and it's yet another Quentin Tarantino film that, look, I love Quentin Tarantino's films. I mean, not every single one, but for the vast majority of them, I love Quentin Tarantino's films. They're great, but they are all very similar. They're all very similar. Like, you can tell a Quentin Tarantino film from a mile away. If you watch a Quentin Tarantino film without the opening credits and you didn't know who directed it, you would pick out it's a Quentin Tarantino film pretty quick. There is a certain comfort zone that Quentin Tarantino inhabits making his films. And within that comfort zone, he has created some, as you're saying, brilliant cinema. Some brilliant cinema. But to me, and not everybody has to agree with this, I'm just saying for me, if you really want to cement your legacy as like one of the greats, I think you got to get out of your comfort zone. I mean, even the most diehard Quentin Tarantino fans, aren't you a least bit curious to see him try something a little bit different? Whether it's like a straight up comedy or a mystery film or, a pure sci-fi film, like without all the Quentin Tarantino tropes. Like, wouldn't that be interesting to see? And I think like one of the reasons that I personally believe that, Steven Spielberg is the greatest filmmaker of all time is not just because of his resume, which is incredible, but as you go over his filmography, every film is vastly different from the previous, right? Like E.T. is completely different from Raiders of the Lost Ark, which is completely different from Lincoln, which is completely different from Jaws, which is completely different from War Horse, which is completely different from Schindler's List, which is completely different than on and on and on and on and on. Like he has shown as a filmmaker, he can tell any kind of story in any way and make it awesome. It doesn't matter if it's a Ready Player One, which is completely different from Catch Me If You Can. He can make these vastly different types of stories from each other, and he doesn't just have one little comfort zone. And that's why, as Quentin Tarantino is getting closer to the end of his career, I would love to see a dude with that much talent really cement his legacy by showing he can do stuff outside of his box. And I don't mean that as an overt criticism because I love his movies. I mean, I think his movies have just been getting better and better. I don't love Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, but his couple before that, I love Inglourious Bastards. I love Django Unchained. I mean, I just think he's been getting even better and better as he goes. I love the dude's films. Again, I just like to see him break out of that box a little bit. But that's just me, JB. I can see where you're coming from too. All right, Ron G writes, You have the ring, and I see your Schwartz. Oh, this is another Spaceballs quote. And I see your Schwartz is as big as mine. Let's see how well you handle it. Love the show. I like the new rotating team. I like my rotating team as well, you know. And who knows? We might tinker around with it a little bit, you know, in the future. I mean, Erin's a working actress, so she might not be able to be on the show for long. Chris is also a working voiceover actress, and she got other stuff on the go, so maybe she's not around for long, but. You know what? I've always been very lucky to be working with some really great people. And I certainly do have a great bunch of people right now. And I always love it. Whenever anybody wants to send in a chat, simply talking quotes from Spaceballs, you got me on board, Ron. Thanks for that, man. All right. The Bearded One writes, can't wait to see Midway in 1917. You know, these are both movies that were barely on my radar, and I really didn't pay much attention to them until their trailers dropped. That Midway trailer dropped, I guess, what is it, about a month ago now? Maybe it was longer than that, but it feels like about a month ago. And I'm like, wow, like sign me up. This actually looks pretty damn good. And then that 1917 trailer, for a first trailer, that was a pretty damn good first trailer. Both of them got me actually pretty damn interested in both these movies, and I'm looking forward to both of them, Bearded One. Zombitron5678 writes, showing my friend The Avengers, and she loves Black Widow now and can't wait to see where her story goes. Oops, I'm going to have to buy her some tissues. Yeah, you and I know where that story's going. But hey, at least she's got another movie coming out in a few months, right? So there's that as well. That's always kind of funny. Man, I love this character. I'm sure everything's going to work out for them. Yeah, you might be right. Get the tissues ready because she might be a little bit upset. All right, Jovan Hudson writes, hey, John. I wanted to know your thoughts on D-Box or the immersive cinematic motion. I wanted to try it out, but I'm not sure if it's worth the money. I'll be honest with you, Jovan. I've been asked this question before. A couple of times. People have written in and asked, what do you think about D-Box? I've never used it. I've never experienced it. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm not saying it's not worth the money. I've never used it. It might be the greatest thing in movies, but I've never used it. And I honestly don't know. I'm sure there are theaters somewhere around that uses them, but there's none of the theaters around me have them. And I've never really felt the need to go out of my way to go and try them. Who knows? Maybe I'll try it sometime and think, why the hell did I not use these earlier? But as of right now, I've never used them myself, so I can't give you a recommendation. Sorry, but I mean, I've heard good things about them though, Jovan. I've heard good things about them, but I can't speak to them and I can't recommend them myself personally because I never use them. Harry Mudd writes, hello, Aaron and Chris. Well, clearly they're not here right now. Good to see you. It's always good having an Aaron and Chris on here. We had a really fun show this morning with the three of us. I love having those guys on. John DeBenedict writes, watched The Boys yesterday. Bloody fantastic show. I'm telling you what, dude, I binged the whole season in one sitting. Well, one day. I finished the John Campea Show the day that it dropped, went and started watching it, took a few breaks to hang out with my wife for a bit, eat meals, use the bathroom, things that go for a walk, but watched it all the way through to 2 a.m. in the morning, watched it all in one day. Love that show. Papo Shimitz writes, hey, John, my girlfriend is kind of angry that I spend more time with you than her. What do I do? Well, get her into the show too, and we can have ourselves a little threesome. That didn't come out right. I regretted the way I said that as soon as it came out of my mouth. That's not what I meant, but the principle stands. Best thing to do, get her into the glory of the John Campea Show. Have her join us. That's called good quality couple time. Sitting down together to watch the John Campea Show together. That's your best option, Papo. All right. Samuel May writes, just rewatched Thor 1 and I forgot how good it is. Dude, I am always saying the number one most underrated comic book movie of all time is Man of Steel. The second, in my opinion, most underappreciated, underrated comic book movie ever made is the first Thor, directed by the great Kenneth Branagh. I think that movie is woefully underappreciated. I think that movie's fantastic, and I'm glad I'm not the only one, Samuel. I'm glad you enjoyed it, my friend. All right. Tausif M writes, Pattinson doesn't have a deep enough voice. Thoughts? Says who? Says who? I mean, his voice is like just as good as Michael Keaton's. And I think that's a completely irrelevant thing. I mean, as long as he doesn't have a Mike Tyson voice, which would be awkward for a Batman, I must admit. I honestly, Tausif, I don't think it's an issue. I really don't. I don't think it's going to be an issue whatsoever. at all. I mean, nothing can be worse than Christian Bale was a great Batman. Don't get me wrong, but nothing can be worse than I'm talking like this, like that horrible, horrible voice he did. Now I love those Batman movies, love them, but that was a terrible voice, terrible voice. So I don't think that's going to be an issue for Robert Pattinson, to be honest with you, brother. All right, Michael Lagrange writes. Sorry if this has been asked already, but will Baron Mordo be back? I was surprised he wasn't mentioned for Doctor Strange 2 at Comic-Con. I don't know. I don't have any insider information or any facts. I suspect he will be. Now, his presence not being there at Comic-Con, hey, you know what? He's a busy dude. He may have had other things going on that he couldn't be a part of, or maybe he's not in the sequel. I'll be a little bit surprised if he's not. Let's put it that way. I'm not 100% convinced he will be, but I'll at least say that I'd be surprised if Chiwetel Ejiofor was not in Doctor Strange 2. I have a feeling he will be. He may not be the main baddie. You know, we're hearing somebody else might be the main bad guy, but I got a feeling he'll be there. I think he'll be there. Again, I don't know that for a fact, no insider information, but I think he'll be there. All right, Jeff Newbaum writes, Aaron in The Boys, were you up for A-Train's girlfriend? No, I believe she mentioned she was up for Queen Maeve. I think Aaron was almost Queen Maeve in that. I hope I'm not giving away anything. I thought she said that on the show. Maybe I'm wrong. Anyway, David Linian writes, Lillian writes, the plane scene in The Boys gives me chills just thinking about it. In the graphic novel, the flight was actually a plane on 9/11. Crazy. That scene, I mean, I was already loving The Boys when I believe the plane scene, which I think happens in episode 4. The plane scene happens. Maybe it was a little bit later than 4, but that was a scene to me that made me go, this show isn't just fun. This show's great. It's not just fun. It's not just enjoyable. And it's fine. There's a lot of shows and movies that I think are just fun, and that's fine. But this isn't just fun and enjoyable. And this is great. Like that plane scene took the show to a totally different level. And I'm not going to give away any spoilers about what the plane scene is, but to me, that took it to another level. And I absolutely, David, I'm with you on that. I love that scene. Absolutely loved that scene. All right. Sin Vendetta writes, how the hell did you forget about Deadpool's opening credits? Because they are the very best opening credits ever. Oh, I didn't forget about them, Sin Vendetta. See, here's what Sin Vendetta is talking about. On the John Campea Show earlier today, one of the topics we talked about, somebody wrote in and asked about, because fewer and fewer films use opening credits. It's a lot of opening films now don't have proper opening credit scenes anymore. And they're asking, should they make a comeback? I believe no. Don't waste time with opening credits. Now, I did not forget about Deadpool's opening credits. They're great. But guess what? For every one Deadpool opening credit scene, there's 30 opening credit stuff that is just waste of cinematic time. Right? Just a waste of time. Yes, every once in a while, there's a movie that has great opening credit scenes, but those are the minority. Those are few and far between. And I would rather them just get rid of all of them. Yes, that means that there's going to be a few diamonds in the rough you're going to miss out on, but that's better than having to sit through 20 or 30 other films with useless stuff, rolling credits that we just don't need. It's like, just get to the movie for heaven's sakes. So I don't forget about Deadpool, but that's the exception that proves the rule. You know, it's the exception. It's not the rule. It's the exception, and the rare exception at that. So I'm not forgetting it. It just kind of proves the point, to be honest with you, from my point of view at any rate. All right. Mass Effect Fan 101 writes, you're awesome in every way, John. Well, maybe not. I have no fashion sense, that's for sure. But I agree with Aaron on the opening credits. Some of my favorite growing up were in the Star Trek movies. And again, look, we held a poll today as a part of the John Campea question of the day. And I'll tell you what, even though more people agreed to leave them out, let me see if I can bring this up here. I'm not sure that I can, but let me see if I can. Yeah, there it is. There was the question of the day today. Was should opening credits in movies make a comeback? We discussed. Nearly 2,000 of you voted, and the majority of you said no, leave them out. But there are more people at 44%. That's more people than I thought would say. I honestly thought it would be a much smaller number than that, but like a good 44% of people said they would actually like to still have and see a return of opening credits. To me, it's a phenomenal waste of time. Again, there are the odd one, like the Deadpool one, that's awesome, but that's rare. That's really rare. So I'd rather see them gone. But you know what, Mass Effect, clearly at 44%, that means a bunch of people out there agree with you too. So you're not alone, sir. You are not alone. All right, let's move on here. Next one comes to us from Matthew Leach, who writes, I agree with Aaron's view on Affleck's Batman film. Damn it, I can't remember specifically what she said about Affleck's Batman film. But anyway, I'm sure she'll be happy to hear that you agree with her, Matthew. Ben Burnside writes, John, is this year the best NBA offseason ever? I don't know that it's the best one. It's certainly one of the more active ones. How about that? It's certainly one of the more active off seasons in NBA history. But whether it's good, I don't know. We'll have to see. Whether it's Russell Westbrook or whether it's, where Chris Paul ended up going and Kawhi and on and on and on and on. I mean, it was just superstar after superstar moving. Most active, yes. Were the moves all great, though? Were they exciting moves? I'm not sure. So I'll compromise with you, Ben. I'll say it was certainly the most active. Certainly the most active offseason in the NBA ever. One Titans writes, streaming services should be like Sirius radio, no censorship. Here's the thing. I get into this debate all the time, and I think I'll bring it up again too. People misunderstand what censorship is. And I didn't want to get into it with Aaron today because we had to move on to the next topic, but Aaron was saying like Amazon was censoring The Boys because they took one scene out of the entire season, right? People misunderstand what censorship is. Censorship is when somebody else is telling you what you can or cannot say or what you can or cannot see. Right? That's censorship. The Boys is Amazon's show. It's their show. If I choose not to say crumpet butter, I don't know what crumpet butter is, but if I make a choice to not say crumpet butter, that's not censorship. Now, if you come to my house and tell me you are not allowed to say crumpet butter, that's censorship. That's censorship. If I myself choose to not say it, that's my choice. It's not censorship. That's my own thing. Nobody was telling Amazon they couldn't put that scene in their show, and it's their show. Nobody was telling Amazon they couldn't put that scene in their show. Amazon just said, we choose for our network and our show to not have that scene. We choose. Nobody told Amazon they couldn't have it. Nobody said whatever. It's just that they made the choice that we don't want that scene in there. That's not censorship. All right? That's not censorship. Censorship is when you get told what you can and cannot do, or you can and cannot see, or whatever. When it's outside and they take that choice away from you, that's censorship. When somebody comes up to you and tells you in your own platform, in your own space, in your own way, in your own entity, and somebody tells you what you can and cannot say, that's censorship. But when you're making choices for yourselves, when companies make choices for themselves, for their products, that's not censorship. That's them making a choice for themselves. People are very quick to throw around the censorship word when really it's inappropriately being applied. So, and then you say, streaming service, there should be no censorship. Okay. What if Amazon wanted to make a reality show where they travel to third world nations and it's a reality show and they literally kill children in the streets? Should they be allowed to air that? Or should the government step in and say, no, you can't do that? I mean, that's hyperbole, clearly. I'm using an extreme example to make a point, but Anyway, Titans, I just think people misuse and misunderstand what censorship is. When a network makes a decision or a studio makes a decision about what they want in their own properties, that's their choice. That's their choice. If the government were to come in and tell Amazon, you got to take that out of your show, well, then that's censorship. So I just think it's really important to know the distinction between the two. That's my thoughts on it anyway. Adam Douglas writes, Soup Goop, I'm telling you, this is one of the funniest moments we've had on the show in a long time. Talking about that scene that was cut out of The Boys of Homelander masturbating over New York City. Soup Goop. And then Chris said Soup Goop. That, I swear to God, I thought I was going to lose my mind. I thought I was going to completely lose it. I didn't think I was going to be able to keep it together after that. All right. Adrian Musio writes, Soup Goop, get this trending like now. Hashtag Soup Goop. I didn't help the cause because I just quickly, as we were doing the show, as Aaron was talking, I ran over to Twitter quick and hashtag Soup Goop, but I think I misspelt it, but whatever. That is something that needs to get trending on Twitter like immediately. Miguel Valdez writes, John, I hate Homelander from The Boys. You? Well, I mean, yeah, he's a dick, but I love the character, man. I love the character because he's a dick. You know, he's a great antagonist. You're supposed to hate him. And I do. I hate him. It's the worst thing when you're telling a story or making a movie and you got your bad guy and the audience doesn't hate them. You can't get the audience emotionally invested enough in it to hate the villain. They did that with The Boys. I hate the Homelander, but that makes me love him as a character, but I hate him. You know, that's the way it should be. Another Skywalker writes, I don't want Solo 2. Ford is Han Solo. I would have loved an Obi-Wan or Old Republic movie. It wasn't fatigue. It was a bad idea after a divisive The Last Jedi. Listen, you're preaching to the choir. Now, don't get me wrong. If Harrison Ford passed away and like 5 years later they decide to do a young Han Solo movie, I'm actually okay with that. But the fact of the matter is, they decided to do a young Han Solo movie literally 2 years after we just saw Harrison Ford as Han Solo on the big screen. We just saw. Like, it was just a hop, skip, and a jump ago, we just saw Harrison Ford back on screen as Han Solo. And then like 2 years later, a year and a half later, however long it was, you're doing a young Han Solo movie without Harrison Ford. It was the dumbest idea. It was the dumbest idea. And I knew it. You guys know. Go back and watch it. I thought it was a bad idea right away. It turns out it was. And I agree. It wasn't fatigue or anything that did it. It's just, it was a movie nobody was interested in. There was no interest in something like that. I mean, it still almost made $400 million, but by Star Wars standards, $400 million just doesn't cut it, kid. You know, it just doesn't cut it. So, again, I'm in complete agreement with you on that. I'm in complete agreement with you. And I'm looking forward to seeing new stories with new characters and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, you're right. I mean, an Obi-Wan movie would have been a better idea. Something set in the Old Republic, whatever. But it was just, it was folly. Another Skywalker. It was folly. That's how I see it at any rate. All right. ZOMG Ruler writes, if Birds of Prey featuring Harley Quinn fails, does that hurt Wonder Woman 84? I don't think so at all. I think Birds of Prey is going to be seen as a very niche kind of movie, I think. I don't think it's going to be looked at by the audience as a big scale Batman versus Superman or a big scale Wonder Woman or a big scale Avengers or a big scale Captain America. I think it's going to be looked at as kind of like an indie film in many ways. That's the sense I'm getting. Now, any superhero movie failing, like being bad and all that kind of crap, that doesn't help. But honestly, I really don't think the success or the failure of a Birds of Prey movie is going to have much effect on Wonder Woman in any way. Gabriel Reed writes, I love all three Austin Powers opening credits. Those films are so underrated. They are phenomenal. I don't think the Austin Powers movies are not underrated. They're celebrated. Everybody loves the Austin Powers movies. They're not underrated. I'll be honest with you, though. I can't remember any of the opening credits. I remember the movies, but I don't the Dutch. I cannot remember like opening credits to any of them, but I would not say they are underrated in the least. You ask anybody, do you fondly remember Austin Powers? Most people go, yes. I mean, I think it's a very appreciated franchise, as a matter of fact, and deservedly so. Those movies are hilarious. I love them. The world needs more Mike Myers again. All right. Valhalla Erikson writes, probably the only one who didn't like The Boys. To me, it's just another dark deconstruction on superheroes that we've already seen before. Well, look, seriously, if it didn't work for you, it didn't work for you. And nothing wrong with that. I mean, we all watch entertainment. It's an art. Art hits us all in different ways. It had a certain effect on me, had a different effect on you. Nothing wrong with that. To say it's something we've already seen before, I highly disagree with. I radically disagree with you. Now, is this a darker deconstruction of superheroes? Yes, but there are a million ways to do that. That's not just one thing. I would propose that The Boys, while yes, a dark deconstruction of the superhero mythology, is a radically different approach and a radically different end product than something else along those lines, be it a Mystery Men or be it a Doom Patrol or be it a Titans. It's all you can say is kind of a darker look at the deconstruction, a more fallible deconstruction of superhero motifs. But I still think at the end of the day, The Boys is radically different from any of the other ones I've ever seen. So I hate the fact that it didn't work for you. No problem. That's art. It's all going to hit us in different ways. But I would completely disagree with you that we've seen this before, because I really don't think we have. But that's just my opinion on it. All right. Static Space Sean writes, what would you think of a one-shot that shows Cap putting back each of the stones and how he does it? I'll be honest with you, I wouldn't be interested. Like, who cares? We know that each one of them gets returned. We know that he gets back in here. I don't think Marvel needs to waste time, man hours, resources, marketing, all that kind of stuff when they could be making something else to tell a story that we already know the results of everything that happens. We know he returns that stone, then 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 he returns that stone, and then he decides he's going to stay with Peggy, then he lives his life, and then he comes back and talks to, Falcon and Winter Soldier at the end, hands over the sheet. I just feel like there's no need to do that. Why take up, Marvel can only make so many things per year. Why take up precious time, energy, finances, resources to do that when there's a million other things you can do? So don't get me wrong. I wouldn't say it's stupid for them to do it if they decided to do it. I just think there's much better things to do with their time and their resources. I just don't see any need for it. Personally, that's just me though. Arjun Rathi writes, Captain America, Dark Knight, what's the better trilogy? I've been asked this 1,000 times. As a matter of fact, I was just asked this just a couple of days ago. Captain America trilogy is the better trilogy. Now, the best single film is The Dark Knight. That's the best single film out of the bunch. But overall, the set of 3 films, overall, the Captain America trilogy is better. Just my opinion, of course. Ben Rayner. And this is our final question, then we're all cut up. Ben Rayner writes, best of the week back this week? Yes. So for those of you who don't know what Ben is talking about, on Fridays, although, I don't get around to every Friday because how busy my schedule is, but on Fridays for our Patreon supporters, and of course, we have a Patreon campaign. You can look in the description of this video if you're interested in becoming a Patreon supporter of the show. For our Patreon supporters, we have a podcast that is exclusively just for our Patreon supporters. It's called Best of the Week, where I talk about my favorite things from that week in the world of, out of all the stories that we covered and the movies that I've seen and the TV shows that I've seen and the news stories that we covered. And we also take questions from our Patreon supporters exclusively from them, and the show's exclusively for them. So yes, there is going to be one of those tomorrow. That's Friday. There is the new episode of Best of the Week. So thanks for asking, Ben. I appreciate that. All right, guys, that will do it. We are now all cut up here for this installment of the companion videos. All questions are now caught up on. Special thank you to all of you guys who sent in those questions, because not only did you give us fun stuff to talk about, you also supported the channel while you were doing it, and I thank you for that. So does Aaron and Chris and Robert and fact checker Jonathan and Ray. We all thank you for supporting the channel on that level. It's because of you guys we're able to do what we do. All right, guys, that'll do it for me for now. My name is John Campea, and until next time, bye-bye.